Okay, so about, I'm going to say 4 years ago, um, I was at a bar and having like a class reunion, class of 65, way back in the way back. Um, and everybody was talking about, remembering the teachers and this and that and the other. And all of a sudden, this one fellow popped into my head that I'd forgotten about. And I said, "Oh my gosh, does anybody remember George?" And I used to remember his last name, but now I can't remember his last name. Um, does anybody remember George? And this one fellow said, "Yes, he was on the battlefield in Vietnam. He was killed on the battlefield in Vietnam." And I just suddenly started to well up, and I went in the ladies' room, and I went in a stall, and I sat there and I cried. And I cried and I cried. Did I have a crush on this guy? No. And I never remembered him from the time that we were in high school together until the time of that reunion. I really didn't remember him until we were sitting there, and all of a sudden they were talking about their military days and such, and I said, "Oh, does anybody remember George? I don't remember George. What was his name?" And this other classmate of mine said he was killed in Vietnam. And that's been, what, 30 years, 40 years? So I went in the bathroom, cried. Other classmate came in, said, "Are you okay?" And I came out of the stall and I was crying, and I said, "Oh, I'm just upset because I never really even remembered George until just today when they were talking about um, the Vietnam War when we were in high school and such." And I remember George because, well, we were both in dumb math together. If you don't pass a certain test, then you had to take dumb math so that you could know basic math. Well, he and I were in dumb math, and the class was full. I got news for you. But after a week, they gave us a test again, and I passed the test, and he passed the test. So we walked down the hall together to get to the office so that they could send us to a different class because we passed our dumb math class. And then I never saw him again. And now I find out that what happened was he left school. He never graduated from high school. He left school, was drafted into the army, and sent to the battlefield in Vietnam and was killed. I'd lived my I'd lived my whole life, had a life, had family, had people I loved, met a man I love, still do. But he died 45 years ago. Mm. That was very devastating. Now, he was um, what you might call a little mentally off. I don't know what to call it. So, and now I've learned that all of the young men who were drafted and had mental illnesses of this sort, that sort, whatever, went in the Army. They were put in the Army and on the battlefield because our country decided that people who were a little bit mentally ill, or whatever you want to call it, um, just put them on the battlefield, let them die. Yeah, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, just our leaders, just put them on the battlefield and let the enemy shoot at them and use up all their weaponry, and then we'll come in and kill them. I remember one episode of MASH. We always watched MASH. Still do when we get the chance. And there was a fellow who was mentally unstable, whatever you want to call that. I don't know what you call it anymore. There's new words that they use for this now. But anyway, they were mentally unfit. And he was on the battlefield. He didn't quite understand what the war was all about or anything like that. And of course, the MASH doctors were angry that he was even in the military. And just about the next episode after that, MASH was taken off the air because they were talking about something that our military did probably during all the wars. Take the people who are mentally ill and just put them in a uniform and stuff them on the battlefield and let them get killed. Who cares? But anyway, that's where my friend went. George was his name. And like I said, I was so upset. I just went in the ladies' room and cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. Hadn't even thought about him for 50 some years. But when I knew that he was in Vietnam, and killed, that was more than I could take. And I just broke down. I just broke down. So then what do I do after that? I've said before, I'll say it again. I married a veteran, United States Navy, Vietnam era. It was just an era. It wasn't a war. No, it wasn't a war. It was an era. He worked the second most dangerous job after, of course, the battlefield. He worked the flight decks of the aircraft carriers Ranger and Midway in the Gulf of Tonkin. He had a dangerous job. He was on the flight deck. So, what I'm telling you, relatives, oh, that's weird. That's weird. Huh. What do I do? Here? So, I'm telling you, relatives, to remember your Uncle Mike. That's what he prefers, is Mike. Remember your Uncle Mike? Know he was a veteran. No, he was brave. He didn't necessarily want to be there, but there was this thing called the draft, and you had to go. If you were drafted, then you went in the army, and he knew that, and that meant battlefield. So, there was supposed to be a draft, but then he decided that he was going to join the Navy, and then that way, so he never got drafted, but he joined the Navy before the draft got him because he'd rather be in the Navy. His father was in the Navy. His father was in the Navy during World War II in the Pacific, just like him, in the Pacific. What can you do? Love him. Love him. Like it or not.